Welcome back, everyone. We will continue with our sociological exploration of self. Today we are going to examine how space shapes the construction of self. The first few questions that we need to ask are, what are the characteristics of the space? Whatever space we're talking about, whether it's a classroom or a football game, the internet, or in your home, there's certain characteristics about that space. So we have to ask how space impacts communication, how space impacts social interaction. We have to think about that space and say, what are the characteristics of the space and how do they shape the social construction of self? All of those questions presuppose the idea that spaces have characteristics. They do impact social interaction and communication, and they do impact the social construction of self. The important things are, how do they do that? How does this happen? One of the things I want to point out about my reading of this text is that when you read well-done sociology, you do not simply summarize the main ideas. You always have to ask, how is this article relevant to things beyond its scope? So I want you to think about implications. Whenever you read anything, say, okay, well, maybe this article was about men, but what are the implications for women? Or what are the implications for gay men? Or what are the implications for rich men? You always want to push the boundaries of analysis and think about what are the implications for other spheres or other contexts or other groups. So this article concerns cyberspace and cyberselves, but the sociological questions it raises are relevant and useful to other spaces and other selves. So I want to point out that as I analyze the reading and take it apart, that I always want to keep in mind that all of the arguments are relevant to other spaces. Well, this article is about cyberspace, and again, the main argument that we're making is that space shapes your construction of self. So what are the important characteristics of cyberspace? Well, the author of our text says that anonymity. It is possible that people you interact with in cyberspace have no idea who you really are. I could go into a chat room, call myself Mary, and everyone can think I'm a woman. And no one has any idea that I am really a guy named Mike. Disembodiment. People do not see you. So you can detach from your physical form. I could tell everyone that I'm 6 feet tall, and I have six-pack abs, and I have blonde hair and blue eyes. We can change our bodies in a symbolic way. We can't change our bodies really. I mean, I can't become 6 feet tall, but on the internet, I can tell people that I'm different than I am. People in cyberspace may not have prior knowledge of you, which gives us a lot of greater freedom. In a lot of our social interactions, we interact with people who know us. When I go to Copper Mountain College, I interact with other teachers who have a prior knowledge of me. Therefore, if I try to escape their prior knowledge, they will usually pull me back in and say, Mike, we know you and you're normally a nice guy. Why are you being mean today? On the internet, they have no prior knowledge of you, so a lot of people feel like it gives them greater freedom to play with their identity. Due to the nature of cyber interaction, people cannot make assumptions about you based on social cues. Now, what are social cues? This goes back to the Goffman article. Goffman argues that when we look at each other, just being in the same room with somebody, we are giving off social cues. If I am wearing shoes with holes in them and pants that are stained and I haven't shaven for weeks and my teeth are brown and there's an odor coming from me, you can glean from those social cues who I am, what I'm about, what's important to me, things like that. They might not be correct, but the idea here is that without even saying anything, we are projecting ourselves and other people are interpreting ourselves. So, in cyber interaction, people can't use all of those cues about you. There's less cues. They're not physically seeing your face and your clothes and your shoes and your teeth and your haircut and things like that. So there's less social cues to think about. How does cyberspace shape the construction of self? How do people in spaces create themselves and interpret others? Well, the author of our text argues that people use their screen names. People will tell others what their gender is based on their screen name. They'll tell others what their hobbies are, where they're from, whether they're interested in trying to have cyber sex, whether they're interested in friendship. All sorts of things are communicated with their screen names. People select their screen names intentionally and strategically. Also, on cyberspace, people use self-claims. They tell people who they are. With real-world interaction, we don't need to make as many self-claims. We make self-claims, but we don't need to make as many because people can see what we do. On the internet, a lot of it is about self-claims. Therefore, multiple selves are possible in cyberspace. How do you construct yourself in cyberspace? Well, one thing to do is to have multiple selves. The last way, this answer pertains to the question, how do people in spaces create themselves and interpret others? The author of our text talks about dramaturgical epistemology. Wow, that's a lot of big words. Epistemology is how you understand, know, and believe in the world. All of us have an epistemology, the way we interpret reality. That's what epistemology means, how you interpret reality. Dramaturgical goes back to Goffman again. Goffman says that we are performing, and we know that the other person is performing, and they know we're performing. When you put these two ideas together, they seem like they'd be in conflict, but he says they sort of work together in a weird way. People in online situations have suspicion that others are faking it. But at the same time, they suspend all knowledge that it's pretend. There might be a man pretending to be a woman on the internet, and other people might say, you know what, I suspect that's not really a woman. I suspect that that's a man. But I'm going to suspend my disbelief and sort of, I'm going to pretend like we're not pretending. And that's sort of an outcome of cyberspace and the creation of cyberselves, is that people are suspicious, but at the same time, they sort of go with it. So what are the social consequences for all of these things? What are the social consequences for space, social consequences for social interaction? What are the big consequences for our society? Well, one of the things that the author talks about are problems of legitimacy, authenticity, and trust. In cyberspace, there might be doubt. There might be that skepticism because people have been fooled and they don't want to be fooled again. So people might start to become untrustworthy of each other because there is so much anonymity and disembodiment in the internet. The other outcome of this is hyperfluidity. This is the idea that the self can easily change shape, the self can change readily, the self is not fixed, it's not stable, it's not rigid. You can jump from being a man to a woman at the flip of a coin. The last consequence of cyberspace for cyberselves is the idea of self-games. And here the author argues that people are playing with themselves. In a sense, a person can be their own audience because they're playing with others, they have multiple selves, and they can spy on their friends with one screen name, they can talk to their friends with another screen name, and they can play with people, and they're also sort of playing with themselves. And there's a lot of consequences about this. A lot of sociologists are examining the increased individualization of our society, where we're starting to become so individualized, we think we're so unique, there's so many activities that are geared towards the individual, where I am watching a movie by myself, I am playing a video game by myself. You can have these rather intense experiences by yourself. And a lot of sociologists argue that this is a new phenomenon. In the past, there was not as much commodification of the individual. And with the internet, again, people are playing with themselves. They're not playing with others, they're playing with themselves. So there are large implications for our society at large, what's going on with the internet. So in the end, I want you to ask yourself, what are the implications of this analysis? Think about other spaces. Think about classrooms in your home, and think about going out to a club, drinking on a Friday night, or a bar. There are interesting characteristics in these spaces. They're not the same as the internet. We're not talking about, the ability to be completely anonymous at a bar. The internet is a rather extreme space. When it first emerged, it was rather extreme. But sometimes when you have those extremely different spaces, it allows us to think about space differently. So I do want you to think about some spaces, and what are the interesting characteristics about those spaces, and how do those characteristics impact social interaction and the co-creation of self.